Hi there! Our mindsets matter, so let's make them magnificent. Today I want to talk about stress and 3 ways to reduce it. So, what exactly happens in your brain when you feel stress? Well, any negative emotion, including stress and fear, are a result of there being a discrepancy between where you are and where you want to be. So, your brain senses that difference and it wants to do something to bring itself back into equilibrium. So your brain feels like it has to take action. It wants to bridge that gap. And to take action, it activates the fight or flight response, which prepares your body to physically either fight a tiger or run away from it. And that means that a lot of chemicals are released, including cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine, that affect all the different body systems, such as speeding up your heart rate, your breathing, your palms get sweaty, and a bunch of other physical sensations that you actually feel when you feel stress or fear. The result is that it gets you to where you're pumped up, where you're excited to go do something, but there's a difference between that feeling of excitement and fear, and a lot of that is in your mind. So your body's ready for action, and when your mind is excited to take a certain action, or when it knows that there will be a reward at the end, then it feels like excitement. When you're taking action because you're scared, or when you don't take action and those chemicals are still pulsing through your system, you feel fear. And because you feel those chemicals, then you perpetuate those fearful and stressful thoughts. So it's a feedback loop. You feel the chemicals of fear and you think fearful thoughts. Vice versa, you think fearful thoughts, your body releases those chemicals. So how do you break that loop? And why is that loop bad for you? Well, first of all, it's not good to constantly be feeling those stressful chemicals, because then your body isn't able to use its energy towards maintenance and repair. So over time, that can take a toll on your body, because instead of healing a wound or dealing with digesting food, for example, it has to redirect its attention to fighting that perceived threat, even if that threat is only in your mind, because your brain does not know the difference. So what do you do about that? How do you close that gap between where you think you want to be and where you are? Because that's what your brain wants to get rid of. It wants to close it. The 2 ways to close that gap are to take action or to change your mind. So the 3 ways to reduce stress that take those 2 different options into account are to first identify your fear. Make sure that that your fear is actually a legitimate fear. Is it something you're just picking up from the environment because everyone else is afraid? Is it because you're swimming in sort of a sea of fear, or is it truly something that you're worried about? And if it is, put a label on it. Identify what that worst case scenario is. That can take you to step 2. Once you identify clearly what it is you're afraid of, and even if it's 5 things, list all of them. Then I want you to think about some actions that you can take right now to avoid that worst case scenario, or to plan for it, to prepare for it better if it were to happen. The reason that's important is because even that act of planning is considered an action by the brain. So your brain is seeing that, hey, okay, we are actually doing something to resolve this conflict in the mind. Even if it's not physical action, you're still using that mental energy and that release of energy to figure out how to get rid of that problem. So write down 3 things you could do right now to avoid that potential worst case scenario. If your concern is health, for example, think about ways to maybe boost your immunity right now. If your concern is finances or career, think about some ways that you can take the time now to maybe build your skills for the future. So whatever the issue is, just brainstorm some ideas and just write them down, and plan on taking action on them. But even if you don't, you will feel relief just by knowing that you've done some work to actually use the frontal cortex part of your brain to overcome whatever that fear is. And then the third way to reduce that stress is if you cannot take action, or there's no worst case scenario you can really identify, if the fear is more of a mental idea that you've picked up from others, then change your mind. Look at the fear from a different angle. Look at it from a different perspective. See if there's any possibilities or opportunities that have now opened up that weren't available before. Think about how this situation could result in a better than imagined outcome down the road. What are some possible positive consequences as a result of this? And then just think back to all the difficult times you've had before in your life. You've overcome them. You're strong enough. You're amazing. You've dealt with stuff before. That's why you're here right now. You're alive. You're breathing. And if you were able to deal with everything that you've dealt with up to now, you can deal with this. So look back within. Look at your inner strength. Look how far you've made it. And let that be an example that you can really make it through anything. And if you go within, then you'll be able to see that that source of strength is in staying centered and in calling upon those inner resources and not letting fear stop you from taking action. So whatever your biggest fear is, use one of these 3 steps to help address it and to reduce that feeling of stress, to break that cycle of toxic chemicals that flood your body. So first, identify the fear clearly to know exactly what it is that is causing you the most stress. Second, take action to get rid of that fear, or write down some of the things you could do in the future to avoid the worst case scenario. And third, if you can't do either of those first 2, because there's really nothing you can do right now, then acknowledge that, hey, there's nothing I can do. So what's the use of worrying? Change your mind about what's going on and shift your perspective as much as you can. Hey, truck. Surround yourself with positive people. Surround yourself with inspiration, with motivation, with anything that gets your mind to think in ways that will empower you to take action and that will make you think about what you can control instead of what you can't control. Because there are a lot of things in the outside world that we can't control, but we can always control our response. So think back to that. Think back to what you could be doing right now that you can control that will help you create the future that you want, instead of dwelling on the fears that are arising from the outside environment. So banish your stress and be magnificent.